Hello and welcome to the Message Mindset Trainer Tips, Tricks, and Tools session, May 14th, 2025. Our topic is Unlocking Relevance with Kristin Robinson. Before we get started today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Message Mindset. Message Mindset is a group of 4 heritage interpreters who came together to create a space for supporting heritage interpretation. And we do that through learning engagements, through resources, and through other training options, such as this. So the main thing that we do is offer educational events. We offer the NAI certificate programs. We also offer web events such as this, and we're developing asynchronous material as well. So if you get on our website, you can sign up for those and see what we've got coming up. The bread and butter behind what we do, and the reason why the 4 of us came together to create this website, was our certificate programs through the National Association for Interpretation. We offer the Certified Interpretive Guide program and the Certified Interpretive Host program online and in person. So whether you are a ranger at a natural site, maybe through the U.S. government, state government, or county, or whether you work for a nonprofit such as a zoo or aquarium, or maybe you are a professional tour guide, a city tour guide or a museum tour guide, or maybe a river rafter. All of those people are examples of who gives heritage interpretation. And pretty much it's anybody who does a non-formal kind of educational event, something that's fun and interesting, all wrapped up together. So without further ado, let's get into our session today, Unlocking Relevance with Kristin Robinson.
Thank you, Nikki. As Nikki said, my name is Kristin Robinson, and in addition to being one of the founding members of Message Mindset, I am the founder and owner of Stage Naked, which is an interpretive training service. And I'm really excited to talk about relevance, because whether I am teaching CIG or whether I am teaching one of my own programs to my own clients, relevance features really strongly in absolutely everything that I do. And so I actually want to kick off with a little bit of a story. I was sharing the stage with Paul Caputo, who is the executive director of the NAI. And we were talking to a group of international tour directors about the interpretive toolkit. We were going back and forth, going through the poetry model, and Paul's talking about theme, and I'm going to be following up with relevance. He mentions that many interpreters believe that theme is the most powerful tool in the interpreter's toolkit. And he looks at me and he says, "Wouldn't you agree, Kristin?" And I have to look back at him after taking a beat and say, well, because here's the thing. I think theme is really powerful if you are putting together a formal program. However, if you learn relevance, you have a tool that you can use in your theme writing, which is actually, I would argue, what makes a theme interpretive rather than just the theme that you write for your 5-paragraph fact-based essay. If you learn relevance, you can make the answer to a question relevant. I personally believe that if I only had time to teach one tool and I had to choose between theme and relevance, that I would pick relevance every time. Now, in a perfect world, obviously, where I get to teach both tools, I will teach both tools. I am not anti-theme. I think themes give you some really powerful things. And let me just jump over to my slide. These are some things that I always keep in mind, whether I think a theme is the right choice for a moment or whether I think all I need right now is relevance. I think themes, deconstructing that theme and looking for all of its component parts. What is your point of view? What is your so what? What is your thought provocation? What are the tangibles and intangibles and universals that you want to weave into that carefully crafted theme sentence? If you do that, whether or not it results in a theme sentence that you will say aloud to your guests, you have a bunch of really powerful components that whether you are delivering formal programming or whether you are simply answering questions that your audience has asked, or that a random person who sees you crossing at your organization from point A to point B and they stop you and they ask you a question, you're not going to theme that answer, but you can make it relevant. If you have broken down your theme, however, that relevant answer is always going to be, or can always be, in line with your goals, with your so what, and with your thought provocation goals, because you now understand the connection between your subject matter and the greater purpose of your organization or site. And so it really is this distinction between themes, which are useful in formal interpretation, and relevance, which to my mind is valuable in formal programs, Q&A, touch tables, random questions. There's just more applicability for relevance. So that's why I get really excited teaching this tool. In my own work, I lean a lot into, I teach interpretive storytelling. We feature relevance. When do you interrupt your own storytelling to create that extra little bit of relevance? The other product I do a lot is I work with people who are working on subject matter that has become polarized, us and them, two ideas butting heads. But if we can take a step back and we can use the tools of relevance, amongst other things, we are also able to create space in complex subject, focused programs that will call more people into more conversations and keep them excited to explore possibilities together. It all comes back to relevance. And so I would like us to dive into our first question, which is, how do you, when you are teaching this work to your trainees, new interpreters, students, staff, how do you help them understand the power of relevance to make sure their work is interpretive rather than just a fact bomb? And I would love for people to come off mic, but I will also understand if it shows up in the chat. I know not everybody is where they can actually speak out loud right now. But go ahead and just unmute and sing out. Okay, I see stuff coming into the chat. So there are a couple of things in the chat. First off, I'm going to mention, thank you, Nikki, for throwing these slides are available to you as a PDF so that, if you are a note-taking type, you can take additional notes rather than just capturing what's on my slides. So John talks about the importance of knowing the audience and understanding their motivations. Abby mentions getting it relevance by know your audience. Again, I love that people are coming back to that. That doesn't matter what you say. If they're people you're saying it to don't care. And then let's see. Nina Simon, The Art of Relevance. I haven't watched it. I've read that book. So they discuss the art of relevance after watching there. Mary, would you throw the link to that in the chat? I didn't know she had something watchable. They do an activity using advertising from magazines. Yes, who is the audience? What is the message? How are they trying to connect? I've done that in my CIG as well. It's her okay, it's her TED Talk on relevance. Thank you so much, Mary. One of the things that I'm hearing is that the way I might say this is you're all using relevance to teach relevance. You're all keying in to something that's going to already be familiar to your audience, and you're building from there. One of the Gabby mentioned it's memorable in the brain. Tim Merriman, I believe, is where I heard this particular phrase from. He talks about brain Velcro. And so when we use the tool of relevance to key into and knowing our audience, right? When we learn them, when we learn their motivations, when we kind of do that audience analysis and we get at what might already be in their memory banks. If we can key that somehow and they expose that little bit of brain Velcro, and then we talk about our subject matter in a way that links to that brain Velcro, so much more probability that people will remember long after they leave the talk. Great. Thank you, Mary, for all of that and for the bit about the video. Yes, meaningful and memorable from Gabby. So Using relevance to teach relevance is a piece of it. Tying it to other interpretive principles. We spend all that time teaching frequently about audience analysis, KA, if you use the interpretive equation. It's nice to build on something that the students have already been wrangling with in their head, and now we layer another application onto it. Something that I also will do, oops, hang on. I am not at my normal tech setup, so everything is a little backwards on this machine. Oh, not yet. So one of the things that I will oftentimes do is I will ask the student, either the students or when I'm doing a train the trainer class, we've been talking about interpretation, so the students now have a new vocabulary. I'll ask them to think back on their own experience as an audience member or as a learner or just moving through life, something that impacted them in a way they still remember. Think about what the speaker did to make that land. Think about what the speaker did to help you remember it. And what people start to realize is, oh, they were using relevance techniques, right? That works after you've introduced relevance, at least as a concept and sort of how it works. But one of the things I find that is valuable about starting that kind of a reflection in students and listeners is they realize I already have this in my wheelhouse. Anytime I want somebody in my life to get it about something I'm super excited about, I could info bomb, but oftentimes we are instinctively trying to use a little metaphor, or it's like when something to help people get it. So anytime we can help people realize the skill is already in your wheelhouse, I think it brings more confidence into the mix for our students. Connecting to the audience's schema. Yeah, there's a few additional things that came in here. Interpretive techniques and how those can benefit program and interactions. Yes. Okay, I want to move on to another question, another little mini discussion. So one of the things I had been teaching interpretation for a while, and I couldn't understand why, with all the time that I would spend talking about relevance and talking about enjoyability and how you kind of get a twofer with those things. In my early days, I still saw students would come in and they would be so factish that even if I broke it down, I'm like, okay, they're doing a compare contrast, they're doing a little cause and effect, and all of those things are kind of in the toolkit, but they don't land the way certain other relevance strategies do. And I realized I needed to talk about relevance a little bit differently in order to pull in some of that knowledge of the audience stuff. So if anybody has also had this experience of students who, oh, they get it about relevance, and then they deliver a piece of interpretation and it still sounds like a fact bomb, what are you doing to help students think about different relevance tools and how to do something with them other than just bring in facts that illustrate the importance to you, my listener? Right? Because importance is a big part of it. Relevance can help us understand why a subject is important to the listener in a way I may never have thought about. Why is the Colorado River crisis important to me, even though I live in Connecticut? Well, here's all these reasons, but it could be fact, 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 fact. So what do you do to help your students break out of fact bombing? Anybody want to unmute and sing something out? I know some of the voices out there. I remember seeing your graduating programs from CIG. I know you get this. Yeah, Katie Finch, I'm looking at you. You saw you smile, so I thought, okay, I can at least acknowledge that she knows who I'm looking at. Okay, Abby has said, especially when interpreting for children, I ask interpreters, oh, to challenge themselves first to share how the topic makes them feel. I love that. That is a visceral experience. It calls in sensory engagement. which we know the more senses you appeal to, the more different learning styles you're hitting, but also it is so grounding for your audience members to have a moment to tune in differently. I show a video in my class. It's a little clip from that moment in Ratatouille where I don't know how many of you saw that movie, but you know, the scary food critic is now in the restaurant. He takes a bite of the ratatouille. Flashback. He's a little kid with the skinned knee, and mama makes him ratatouille and he feels better. So I love senses for that. Anything else that you do to help people use relevant strategies that don't result in a fact bomb?
Generally, just reminding interpreters that it's the stories, it's the feelings, it's the experiences that people remember. They're not going to remember what year such and such a thing happened.
100%. Yes. And I love all three of those things that you just put into the mix, particularly the stories. Yes, Heather's got that as well. Mary's got that. Asking the audience to share experiences they remember and why they remember it. Yes. So if we there's actual science behind this, and I've run across it in a lot of behavior science, behavior change research, but I'm sure it's coming actually from the realm of neuroscience and folks like Paul Zak. When people are reflecting on something that they know, right? Number one, they are exposing the brain Velcro that is going to be most powerful to them. So if I ask you, think of a time in your life when you, and I shut up long enough for you to actually do that recollection, you're going to go and you're going to grab the memory. This is what your brain's doing all quick. It's going to grab the memory that is the most powerful, that is most aligned with your values, that carried the greatest meaning and resonance. And now that is the piece of brain Velcro that is exposed while you show how whatever it is you're talking about as a subject matter expert connects to that. When you're storytelling, when you do that in the, one of the techniques I teach in impact storytelling is to disrupt your story for a minute, ask your audience to recollect something that's about to align with whatever the main character in the story is going to experience next. When your audience exposes a memory or calls up a memory, and then you continue on with your story, there is a greater likelihood that your audience is now walking along in the shoes of your main character with all of that good emotional resonance from their own memories. We like the website, The Measure of Things. It takes bigger numbers and data and makes it digestible. Yes, I love that. People do not grasp big, giant numbers or little, teeny, tiny numbers. And it doesn't have to be big, big, big for it to stop having any kind of real world connection for people. There's an example in the CIG that it goes from however many hectares of water go over the Niagara Falls every second, and they rewrite it in terms of bathtubs. And as much as it's still a great big undigestible number, when people start having this visual of bathtubs going over the Niagara Falls, it becomes stickier. It becomes more likely that they will at least walk out with a more visceral sense of what a massive quantity of water this is. All right, I do love all of those things, and I agree with all of them. To me, the power of relevance, and I do love compare, contrast. I do love cause and effect. I think those are really important data points to get into the mix. For me, with people that I've worked with, I still put those kinds of things into the information bucket rather than in the relevance bucket because they tend to be fact-based. And there's nothing wrong with a good fact. Let's then take some of those facts and make them relevant using some of the tools that have popped up in the chat, or a story, or a good bit of self-referencing, which I'm going to get to in a second. Now, one of the things I've mentioned, I like flipped learning. I like getting my audience to do a thing, recognize, hey, this skill is already in my wheelhouse. And now when I think about using it interpretly, I'm just refining it. I'm sharpening the edge on this wonderful tool that I've got. So I will straight up have people start creating elements that they can, for when we teach CIG, they're all preparing for these 10-minute Tuesday talks. But even when I'm working with a private client and we're really just working on tools for their storytelling, I create space in class with a few prompts for them to create tools they might not have thought about creating otherwise. 4 of my favorites are on the screen right now. I do love a good pop culture reference. You see, I've got Wolverine on the screen, a little Marvel movie magic to talk about, and you can actually see the parallel here. It's about the beaver teeth and about beaver pushing iron to the outside. Their metabolism pushes iron out to the coating of their teeth, just like Wolverine's got metal coating all of his bones. Pop culture is fun for audiences because they're not expecting it. They come to your museum, your historic site, your science talk, your nature walk, and they are expecting to hear your subject matter. And then you drop a Marvel movie character or a book reference that's really popular or a movie that's in the theaters right now, right? You drop those things in. The brain loves surprise. So I have them come up with a pop culture reference. I sometimes will have them come up with more than one, because pop culture references, they're not ever going to be one size fits all, right? How many of you actually like Marvel movies? Would my Wolverine reference work for you? Oh, Gabby's all in. Gabby, you just like Hugh Jackman. Let's be real. But not everybody is going to like a Marvel movie, so I might throw a King Arthur and his knights reference in there. You know, maybe I go Monty Python with the Holy Grail or something else. Or I love doing this again in that spirit of flipping things. If I've got a pop culture reference and it's not working for my audience, I tell them what I'm trying to help them connect to, and I ask them, what comes to your mind? What movies, what books, what characters are coming up for you that would be a really good parallel for this? So now, again, they're going into their memory banks. They're coming up with resonant things. More likelihood they will remember. And I'm adding tools into my toolkit the next time I make this reference. I've got a few more things I can try with audiences. Metaphors we talk about all the time. Metaphors are wonderful. A volcano is like a shaken bottle of champagne or like an Instant Pot. I used to use Instant Pot all the time on that one. And then I was working with a group of folks. It was actually a group of Canadian interpreters who do a lot of nature stuff. Very few people in that group owned an Instant Pot. And I don't know if it's a US Canada thing, or if it's a time thing, maybe Instant Pots are falling out of favor. But you do need to give, I would always recommend, give a little thought to having a few different ways that you can help people make the connection. I don't know how many of you know who Alan Alda is, but he's an American actor. He used to host a science program on PBS, and he started working with scientists using improv techniques to help them kind of loosen up and connect with audiences more easily. Some of the stuff we touch on in KA and relevance and enjoyability. And one of his theories is come up with 3 different ways to explain any complicated concept, right? Because if you do that, there's a greater likelihood that you will connect with the majority of the people listening to you in one way or another. Do I recommend doing that with every single time you're trying to create relevance? That might be overkill. But maybe you use that 3 ways technique for a really important concept, or to have backup options that you can roll out if your initial Marvel movie reference isn't working with your crowd that day. Memories. I love asking people to go in, ask people to remember something that is going to tie to your subject matter, right? To make that parallel that way. So that's using a question. And then daily life. Daily life is another one that I have people come up with. What is the daily life parallel to beaver cutting down a tree, to make something up, right? So the images over on the right are sort of another way of they are a reference to some of these exact same things. So when you think about a memory, I could ask people to think about a road trip they've taken. I used to do this when I was talking about the covered wagon overland migration from the United States to California. I also used to be an interpreter who talked about the history of medicine. And so I used to talk about epidemics like cholera and smallpox. We have now all lived through COVID. So COVID and all of those things are going to be in people's memory banks. And I can ask them questions to think about how they handled certain circumstances or what were the questions they were thinking about when they decided whether or not to take a vaccine, right? So these are all tools that I would encourage my students to come up with during class so that they walk out with a usable toolkit, whether it's for their CIG 10-minute talk or for real world interpretation that they're going to be doing after class. I want them walking out with a toolkit because I think some of you who communicated with me prior to this webinar, when we get back into our real world assignments, sometimes the gravitational pull of our facts is so strong. I want people to have the gravitational pull of some relevance tools that they've already built, and now they're a little excited to try. So when I do this as a flipped learning thing, I will sometimes give people physical objects just from my own, uh, things I own in my house, and I'll give them a little description, and I'll say, make this relevant. Make some part of what you have just learned about this tiny little stuffed doll or this weird medical implement or this medallion from a virtual race. Make some piece of this relevant to the audience. Because sometimes if you can give people the chance to create relevance separately from their subject matter, again, we're resisting the gravitational pull of information and facts. All about the air fryer now. That's true. You're right, Allison. I think the Instant Pot is sort of last year's news. Okay. I do have a couple of other questions, and I know that we want to pause a little bit before the top of the hour. So when it comes to teaching relevance to students, some of you have already got a lot of these tools that you use to help create importance, help people understand the importance of the tool, to help them avoid fact bombs. But in terms of really getting them to embrace relevance as they go forward into the world, are there some specific strategies that help? You can see there's sort of some sub questions there on the right. Sometimes we have different student groups that come through and they have to be tied to curriculum, right? That's another thing that can cause interpreters to stop making things relevant and lean back into information and getting facty because it's a curriculum tie-in. So that's one question I had. Or maybe you've got students from different kinds of heritage work that need different tools. So I'm just, I gave you 4 of my favorites. What are some tools or strategies that you always want to make sure to give your students when you are teaching? Okay. Bridging from tangible facts to intangible meanings helps folks find messages that speak to everyone. Getting people to think critically about universal concepts. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. New interpreters or people who are taking an interpretive training class. Thank you for asking me that clarification, Abby. I think I kind of garbled that when I said it out loud, didn't I? Yes, your students, you are training interpretation to folks who will be giving that ongoing frontline interpretation. I think what I was thinking about, Abby, is we have people who are interpreting to adults, interpreting to students, interpreting to international visitors, interpreting that has to be curriculum aligned, interpreting nature versus culture versus history. And sometimes, in my experience, there are different tools that resonate stronger with different communities of students, of interpretive students. That was what I meant by that. I want to go back to what John said. There is when I teach CIG, I teach tangible, intangible, universal completely on its own. I teach it very early, like day 2, when we're talking about our research and our audience. We're doing the interpretive equation. And so I find that doing a tangible, intangible, universal talk helps people understand that relationship. Here's how we're going to bridge these two things together. And I have a wonderful exercise. It's a variation on one I saw using clementine oranges. Because I do a lot of teaching in the Zoom space, I have people uh, do a little exercise where, and there's a few steps. So I model this first where I bring in an object. I help them, describe the object. What are all of the things that the words you would use? And they always pick tangible descriptors at first. It's usually a jar of sand. And they'll talk about it's grainy, it's brown, it's fluid. They're describing all of its tangible properties, but I'm not bringing that language into it yet. Then I tell them the story about that piece of that jar of sand, which is from World War II, Omaha Beach. I'd given it to my grandfather. I used to take tours there. So now I've really built out what this sand is, and I ask them for more descriptive words. Now, almost universally, they start bringing in intangibles and universals. So even in the virtual space, and Monique was with me, we were team teaching, and we did this exact same exercise live. So it works in both spaces. And then we look at the two lists, and they've all, we talk about how tangible qualities can be experienced with the senses, how grounding that is. It's, we can pass objects around if we're really in the space. And now we are tying that to intangible, these ideas that actually are the things oftentimes that we want people to connect to. I wanted people to connect to the bravery, the valor, the sacrifice, the love of the soldiers who were on the beach on this particular day. Not necessarily to the sand itself, but the sand was a way to connect with them in a more visceral way. And then from there, we kind of build it out and we start creating sentences based on linkages between the tangible and intangible worlds. You can spend easily a couple of hours just working on this one skill because it bridges so many different things. It's going to come back when we talk about writing themes, and it's going to come back again when we talk about making things relevant, because those universal concepts, and we spend a fair bit of time talking about universals and how they bridge so many cultures and communities and demographics and age groups if we can find the right one. Okay, there's a couple other things that have come into chat. Polling the audience about shared experiences. Abby, I love that. Raise your hand if you've ever had this happen. And then transition to the animal. That's excellent. I'm just curious. Because immediately I'm like, ooh, how would we also build on something like that? Do you ever have your students do the polling, or do you do the polling to illustrate the point? I'm just curious. I think Abby may be answering that in the chat because I think there's some tech. I will look in a minute. I'm not going to leave you on the spot. Oh, here we go. I will do it to give an example and have them do it. Yes. Anytime we can get our student interpreters actually trying kicking the tires on some of these ideas in class, I think the stronger. Because they're getting it into their bodies, not just into their brains. I encourage students to read nature magazines, documentaries, to see the ways in which people are trying to make things relevant. Yes. And I think somebody brought up advertising. Sometimes you can find really good ads. I saw one on Netflix for a documentary about orangutans. I actually show it now in some of my classes because they had three universal concepts. There was survival, there was family, and there was one other one. And they were all universals, helping humans connect to the lives of orangutans. Making things multisensory and modeling that. Sam Ham's knock-in theory. Monique, if we have time, I want to come back to that. Have them shadow the program of a more seasoned interpreter. Yes. Okay, so Abby's talking about having people break down a piece of interpretation and look for the interpretive tools. And I do a lot of this in the virtual space as well. It is really powerful. And sometimes, again, you can do this flipped and then you can come back and do it again. What do people recognize before we go over relevance? And what do they notice after we go through relevance? What might they add now that they have done some relevance training themselves? I love all of that. Thank you all. We are coming up on the end of the hour, so I want to show you two additional things that I have used in my work, and these are also both in that PDF of the slides that I have been using. I do love a good framework because relevance is so big. There's so much under the hood. And so people can have any entry point they want. They can start from their area of confidence. Some people are just really inspired by getting audiences to connect to the importance of a thing. Important in general, important to them personally. This is where we use that knowledge of our audience. We've really thought through what is important to them. And I would argue that's going beyond demographics and geographics. We really are now in the land of psychographics. We're talking about values, hopes, dreams. The strategy here, give them a fact and then do something so that they discover the so what, right? If we can do that, we're avoiding the fact bomb, because that's the pitfall of only relying on importance. Is we can end up fact bombing. We can end up with the compare, the contrast, the cause and effect, and all we've done is given them a lot of info. We haven't given them that opportunity to expose a little brain Velcro. So the thing to remember here is we're looking to make both head and heart connections with importance. And that's where the so what, I forget who brought that up in the chat earlier. That's where the so what is so powerful. Relatability. This is that flipped learning example that I was giving you, the tools. We want to give people practical tools to walk out of class. And I actually like using the word relatability in addition to relevance. I don't know about y'all, relevance has a little bit of a, okay, what has this done for me lately? Aspect to it. How does it touch my life? Maybe it doesn't, but maybe there's something in my life that matches this thing that doesn't benefit me in any way, but it's still important and I can relate. With relatability, we're really focused on the connection to human experiences. And I mention that because relatability works in the animal kingdom. It works with geology. How can we use experiences of human beings to relate to whatever the subject matter is? Universals are really powerful in here as well, finding that right one. The pitfall, as I mentioned with the flipped learning example, is irrelevant parallels. And the antidote, think through, brainstorm more than one, that you could use, or get comfortable crowdsourcing. And then the last one is personalize it. This is where questions become so powerful, both to help the audience explore with you an idea in its complexity, but also, again, as we've mentioned more than once, going into the memory banks and thinking about what in my life or what in the lives of the audience members will relate to what the interpreter wants to talk about. And I want to give you one last word that I introduced partway through my own training career. I started making a distinction and spending time with any of my students on the distinction between two kinds of questions. How many of you teach questioning during your work right now? Yeah, I'm seeing some hands. Maybe some digital hands can be thrown up, some digital thumbs up, whatever it is. Questions, I really do think you can't beat them. They're interactive. They help the crowd expose that brain Velcro if you're getting them to think about their memories. But all questions don't do the same thing, right? Some questions are knowledge check questions. And they are really valuable if you're trying to understand what the baseline of an audience is, but they are not necessarily useful for exposing brain Velcro. And if you overuse knowledge check questions, sometimes the audience can become downright resistant. Why are you asking me if I can guess what's in your brain before every single thing you tell me about? So it's a balance that you want to do with knowledge check questions. You can see some examples on the left. Do dandelions contribute to yard health? Are dandelions edible? So if your students are trying to gauge the existing knowledge level of their audiences so that they know, do I need to take a step back and do a little bit of explaining about dandelion root systems before I move on? This is so helpful. It also hits a little Maslow because maybe you've got somebody who knows a lot about dandelions and you can acknowledge that they came in knowing stuff. But it's not necessarily helping, as I mentioned, with the relevance and the relatability piece. The questions on the right are interpretive questions. They are asking your audience to contribute something that has nothing to do with facts. What are their memories? What are their insights? What would they do in the shoes of your protagonist? Their own imaginings. The way I teach students to understand, do I have a knowledge check question or an interpretive question? And, there's a little gray area here, but by and large, interpretive questions include the word you, your, yours, us, we, ours. Without those, you are less likely to be asking a truly interpretive question. Does that make sense, the distinction between those two things? Stump the visitor. Yes, Allison. And sometimes visitors don't like being on the receiving end of that game. They don't mind it by, like if it's used once or twice up front. Another thing that I will tell students, tell people if it's unlikely they're going to know the answer. Hey, it is unlikely you will know this, but does anybody happen to know the four humors in ancient Greek four humor theory? Like, if there's a reason to ask that question, don't make your guests feel bad for not knowing the answer of something that's pretty esoteric. All right. We are out of time, I think. I did have one last, if we have just a minute or two, and I can convince you to either unmute or throw it quickly into the chat. If you have to go, you have to go. I think we did say we would be done at 10 minutes till, and we're now at 10:54. Sometimes let me step back. One of the things that we teach oftentimes when we teach the NAI's CIG, when you are defining your audience, do not say, we get everybody, because that's not typically helpful for understanding how to create relevance. But there are some organizations, I think of the Smithsonian. If you just use the evidence of your eyeballs, right? Katie Finch, I saw that face. Does that mean a little bit this relates? Right? The evidence of your eyeballs suggests you get a healthy cross-section no matter how you slice demographics and geographics. So this was my last question. How can you help your audience think about relevance when your audience looks like everybody? Broad questions with multiple answers from Tracy. Tracy, was that the answer to this, or was that the answer to my other question about, or my other statement about, I just derailed.
Demographics, geographics, mix of everybody.
Yep. Thank you. Broad questions with multiple answers. Do you have them prepare in any way to get multiple answers?
I'm not a trainer, but it's just a way that I would speak to my audience in that case.
Got it. Yeah. I've never actually thought about teaching a technique on that, but I will. One of the things that I do talk about when I am teaching more dialogue and conversation-based interpretation is to be prepared to surf what the crowd is giving you. They may give you answers that you hadn't really anticipated. It's perfectly okay to just accept an answer that doesn't allow you to get to the next point. You can accept it, you can appreciate it, you could even ask for more information, but at some point, your audience is going to give you an answer, is going to give you an insight that will work as your springboard to the next point. I've never seen it not happen. Well, it's not true. I have. And then the interpreter can turn around and say, what about this? Has anybody ever experienced this thing? And now you have your springboard. Imagine as a technique. Heather, what are you can I ask you? What are you asking them to imagine?
I am unmuting to make it easier.
Yay.
It depends on the program, but just having them use imagination as a technique. So for our programs, they're all with a free general audience. So imagine you are a keeper today and you need to care for the seal. So just getting everyone to imagine the same thing can help break down those barriers.
100%. and they will imagine in whatever way is most effective for them. Monique had universals. Yes, universal, and so did Heather. So did Mary. Lots of universals. Here's the one thing with universals, I probably don't have to say it to a room full of people who interpret and train and coach. All universals are not universal, right? So they're broadly universal, but you still want to pick the one that's going to be best suited to your audience. And Judith, open-ended questions. I do love a good open-ended question. Something that there is no possible way for people to be wrong, because you are letting them answer from their own lived experience of the world, their own hopes, dreams, and values. The only sensitivity that we have to think about is if we want them talking out loud, we want to make sure we ask a question they're not going to feel too vulnerable to answer. Whether we create some safety at the outset, or whether we just really think carefully about the phrasing of our question. Tracy, thanks for sticking around. And everybody, you have this at the back of the PDF. You are always welcome to reach out to me. Relevance is one of those things I'm deeply passionate about helping people succeed with and train. I can stick around for a few more minutes if folks have questions or want to contribute. Allison, don't just focus on one group. Yet multi-generational groups, absolutely. You have to have different connection points. Thank you, Ginger. Allison, one thing that I will piggyback off of that with multi-generational groups, one of the relevance things that is uniquely available if they are multi-generational families are family dynamics. Family dynamics becomes a psychographic that we can use to help, make connection points. It also can work with student groups because you're going to have the dynamic of, that they are a mixture of classmates and chaperones and teachers, and there are relationships and dynamics in there that we can play off of. So sometimes the makeup of a group can suggest to us a relevant strategy building off of the relationships within the group itself. Yeah, we will, Mary, we will be making this presentation available as a replay. I forgot to turn the recording on, so you missed the first couple of minutes, but most of it will be there. You're welcome. I hope you all found it valuable. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime if you want to kick the tires on some relevance ideas. This is one of my very favorite things. So,
and I'm going to make a quick announcement for our next program. I'm going to share that really quick with you so you can see it. Our next program coming up. Whoops, hold on. Thank you again, Kristin. This was so awesome to have this. I took all kinds of notes, and I teach relevance all the time. And I still learned out a lot of different ways to do this. So this was awesome. Thank you so much. And we will get this. I think I'm going to ask Kristin maybe to reenact the first 5 minutes, because that was my bad also that I didn't hit the recording button, even though I had a big sticky note that said record. Okay, so you already know about us from Message Mindset. So please come visit us there. Our next event is going to be on June 11th. Gabby Plumaso is going to be talking about, listen to this title, this is awesome, between expectation and experience, understanding the zone of tolerance. How about that group that's in front of you, right? What are their expectations? What are the experience that they're actually going to have? Talk about relevant. And then how does it fit within their own zone of tolerance? And how, as a trainer, are you going to notice that it is or isn't landing? Wow, this is going to be so exciting. So the day of that event is going to be a Wednesday. Every one of our trainer clinics is particular to the person who's hosting it. So that was the best day for Gabby. So I wanted to make sure that you all know it's going to be it's not going to be a Tuesday or a Thursday, which is normal for us, but a Wednesday. But same time, whatever time you joined this time, that's when you join next month. So we'll see you then. We'll be sending out some reminders, but we'd love it if you went to messagemindset.com and followed us through there. That's one of the it out. Or like I do, keep a tab right on your computer and just keep going.
Oh, we lost her.
Thank you all again very much. We're here for another few minutes. If you have additional questions for us, you're always welcome to stick around.
Thank you all.